First house of the night, pumpkin-tastic. Yeah, there's well, the whole thing is a lot of pumpkins. Pumpkin-tastic, yo! Okay, we're moving on. Best theme. First place winner. Best theme. I think I remember this house.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it was the gym. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hey.
Oh.
Welcome to Deadlifts.
You guys did it again. Like, we were here last year shooting, too.
We tripled in size.
Yeah, oh, there's way more stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. We went from 7 skeletons to 19. And I have made 2 interactive sections with our house. Walkable locker room. Come on in.
Oh, man. Look, oh, dude. Oh, cool. Where do you find lockers? Like, where do you find it?
Man.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Woohoo!
Got fun.
So you got the sauna or the steamer?
Yes, sauna, of course.
Wow.
He's extra charred.
Yeah,
It's been
you're
there for 2 months.
definitely upped
right.
it from last year.
Yes. And then the shower guy's my favorite as well.
Even got a shower nozzle.
Yep, I went all out. Or I tried to, at least.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's why I know this song.
It's a repurposed Eddie.
Repurposed it.
It's like 2 punk rockers or something.
It reminds me of the cover of like this paperback horror from the 80s called Stage Fright.
Okay, now we are at best theme, right? Best theme? No, yeah, best theme.
I thought this was most creative.
No, that was the gym. Remember, that's how I got it mixed up.
Okay.
Yeah, you remember the steps. Yeah. So let's see. So the theme, apparently, if you do Stranger Things, you win best theme.
Oh, I got Max here.
It looks like he's doing Hell Hitler. It's my comparison to that other Stranger Things house.
I'm waiting for that one to move.
What's wrong, kid? Don't you like ice cream?
Is that the cotton candy guy? Killer Clowns from Outer Space? See you guys. Oh, somebody's watching you.
Rockwell.
Rockwell. Look at that moon. Woo.
Heard strange noises coming from a house on the hill. So I crept up to the window and looked over the sill. My heart almost stopped, I nearly died of fright. By by the dim candlelight, I saw the strangest sight. There was Frankenstein and Dracula and Wolfman too, dancing with some zombies. What a ghastly crew! Viola the vampire was doing the bop, and everything was rocking at the monster's hop.
You had a bad night. Hey, buddy, you okay? A little bit of vomit there, huh? Hi, lady. Can I take you to lunch sometime? Oh, God! Oh, God. Oh my God.
Not since Dracula stalked the earth has the world known so terrifying a day or night.
It is I who renounce you, and in the name of Satan I place a curse upon you.
Man, I'm glad I picked this movie. I am so glad I picked this movie. Directed by Mario Bava. This movie is Italian, and when it came out initially, it was actually banned from the country that it was filmed in from being played for graphic violence and disturbing imagery. I see where that comes in a little bit, especially in the opening scene of the movie.
Yeah, it may have been just that the censor board watched the first 10 minutes and couldn't get past that, which is understandable.
Yeah, I think it's, dare I say, this movie's ahead of its time.
I think so.
It feels like a very mature film for being one of those black and white classic, foreign movies. It's not hokey.
Not at all.
It's spooky. It's atmospheric. It doesn't. I love those goofy ones for what they are, like the Wolfmen fighting Dracula and stuff. For what they are, they're fun. This movie was scary, right? It was pretty scary.
Yeah, it had a nice creepy atmosphere.
It was kind of everything the Nun should have fucking been.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Boy, does this movie suck.
No, as we were watching this, we were very impressed, and I was telling Ben, I think that this could easily go on a list of one of my favorite classic horrors because it just is so well made. That's one of the problems, I think, with some of the classic horror films is they were treated as low-budget productions, and it kind of stands out. You sometimes have hokey sets and bad acting and things. And this movie, I think everything on a production level, on a filmmaking level in this movie really stands out as top-notch. And I was really impressed with this whole production.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, from the very first scene, which is probably the most disturbing scene in the film, the use of camera angles, the use of lighting, the lack of fog machine, thank you. But there is just some interesting decision making in how they decided to frame shots and angle shots through trees and through branches, a way that's really focused and that adds suspense and adds kind of the more like horror to it, because a lot of the things about horror movies is how they're shot, not just like what is on screen, but how they're being portrayed.
100%, yeah. And that's another thing I was saying to you is this director, I'm not that familiar with this director's filmography,
Not
but
at all.
I was so impressed with his filmmaking techniques that I just wonder if this guy, I want to see the rest of his filmography, because I think whether he was making a horror movie or a drama, I think it would be a good movie because I think he just really knows filmmaking.
Yeah, he knew it before a lot of people knew it. Yeah, because just the subtle decisions that he made, quiet moments of suspense, and it's just a detailed movie. And though the story elements kind of dissolve a little bit in the second half, not dissolve, but they kind of start to really slow down. You're kind of led to believe they're maybe into witchcraft or there's some sort of vampire curse on these princes and princesses, and they're kind of tortured and killed to kind of rid their evil spirits or whatever. But there's always a way for them to come back, and then these doctors kind of stumble upon one, and there's a resurrection taking place. So that's the basic story of it. Is like this woman on Black Sunday, 200 years from her death, is trying to be resurrected.
The cinematography is excellent in this movie. Not just the lighting alone, which is really effective for classic horror, black and white classic horror filmmaking. Like there's just some really striking images in this film that play with things that you would seen in like German expressionism type of cinematography.
Oh, exactly.
And then even more modern filmmaking. So, but even beyond the lighting, just the the camera work in this film. There's some really great use of long takes in this movie that I think at the time they were made would have been complicated to accomplish.
Yeah.
There's just some great camera moves where I think in a lot of older films you get more editing versus actual camera movement sometimes. And this movie stood out that they had a lot of fluid camera work that I was just very impressed with.
There's a really amazing establishing shot that trucks around and moves around and gives you a different perspective of the room, shows you 3 different characters and what they're doing, and then goes back to the first character is focused on, all in one take, all in one shot. It was a beautiful shot, and it was like a lot of shots in this movie, it was haunting because of how it's portrayed, and like the sound design is another thing that's really great in this film too. Like it stands out. It doesn't use those typical sounds of that era, like ooh, like when you hear like, oh, those are wolves and the wolves are out tonight. It was a weird, creepy type of wolf sound.
Yeah. As the movie progresses, obviously they take their time to set up once they jump 200 years from this intro scene to our current characters, and they take their time, and there's some nice pacing in this movie to get the story rolling and set up. But once we start moving towards the climax, we notice that they actually are picking off a lot of characters in somewhat of a slasher format, where this movie actually racks up a pretty good body count by the end, and a few of those deaths, they're not super graphic and violent like some of the things we saw at the very beginning of the film. They even go with a little bit of off-camera moments, as you would expect from this era.
They even fucking slit the throat of 2 fucking dogs. You're like, holy shit, this movie is doing this shit.
Yeah.
And I mean, even like some of the suggestive deaths where they don't show it, like when you see them like they cut before you see the eyeball get stabbed, but you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah, that still was like, I almost wanted to close my eyes.
I think it takes a perfect amount of time to show us its kind of prologue intro, to set up characters, to set up the situation, then to get the tension starting to rack up, and then actually give us a climax that works. It's a long climax that gives us time. Feels like this overall wrap up of things. Maybe the final shot, you and I were like, ah, because the fucking witch just like drops off that ladder and burns into the biggest fire you've ever seen. Man, every set piece is so intricate and so big. Like it's like this is a beautiful set to like walk. I mean, it feels like the whole movie was like a big giant haunted house and they had like a month to shoot in or something.
Yeah, I mean, every piece of production design and set design in this movie really stands out. As the attention to detail to create these sets really stands out. It's beautiful. I was even thinking while watching it, that crypt where the woman is kept, the witch, it was just so impressive looking, the depth that they created and the different lighting effects in there. It was like you could put this in a modern movie and it would still be impressive. Like if you used this set for a modern movie, I'd be impressive. Like, wow, this is a fucking awesome, creepy looking crypt set.
Granted, I said I don't think this movie would have worked as well if it wasn't black and white.
I agree.
Like if they tried to remake this movie and give it a lot of color, it just would have changed a lot about it for me. You know, especially the face makeup of the kind of the Walking Dead or whatever.
100%. I agree.
Yeah, not as good as my makeup, but hey, we can't all be that good. I'm pure good and lightning, so that does nothing to me.
That's true. Yeah.
All I am is cotton candy and fucking lightning. So I kind of love Black Sunday. There's actual filmmaking. Oh. This movie is like, wow, this is how you make a horror movie.
So impressive.
60 years ago, or well, I'm not a mathematician. I don't know how long ago it was, but
this is a movie. Of course, I've heard of it for a long time, but I don't know if I would have ever gotten around to just finding this movie and watching it if it wasn't for Mixer. Now I've seen it, and I think it's one of my favorite classic black and white horror movies.
The only thing I ever knew about this movie, you know, when it was talked about or whatever, is you see the masks. That image and that scene where they just these nail masks, this masks lines with nailed, and this fucker is boom
and to torment and destroy.
Boom, and like they don't shy away. There's some splatter coming out of that thing.
That's the best scene.
What about you? Scream? Look at that, guys. Meatloaf with some blood. Yeah. It's delicious. I know it looks. It's a Halloween delight.
In this town, don't we love it now? Everybody's waiting for the next surprise. I'm not gonna be hiding in the trash can. Something's
That's the guts. The guts and the blood. Oh! Catch it! Catch it! Oh!
say it once, say it twice, take a chance and roll the dice, ride with the moon.
Making a brain and having her cut the bottom of hers off so I could use it as a brain.
Yeah, okay. Go for it. Go for it. Quietly.
When are we gonna call her?
This is Halloween, this is Halloween, 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 Halloween. In this town we call home, everyone hail to the pumpkin song.
So John took the night with this bad boy. That's the one. And then you have the Raphael on crack, was it? And then there's my Jason Voorhees.
From deep space, the seed is planted. Terror grows.
Invasion of the Snatch, which is a 70s porno. Oh no, maybe that's not what we saw. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978.
That was my other hit.
This is a remake to the original, which came out in the 50s.
Yes, it is.
Which was really playing on kind of the paranoia of the Red Scare at the time,
Absolutely.
I think. I've actually never seen the original, but I kind of know that fact.
I've seen it. It's inventive. It's creative. It uses what it has for the time, but it's very safe.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this movie. It doesn't terrify you from the science fiction aspect.
Yeah, no, this one did a good job of being creepy, scary, grotesque, and adding that nice sci-fi element to it.
Yeah.
I think it does a good job of being sci-fi and horror at the same time.
And just the idea of sort of clones and the fact that you sort of vanish, you know, like my mustache is doing right now as John is cloning my mustache.
I think it's really creepy, the aspect of how it takes over the body, and really it takes a while in the film for us to know what happens to the humans once that's taken place. They do a good job of pacing the film out and letting the information come out.
It's got no detail, no character. It's unformed.
Jeff Goldblum is awesome in this movie. This is the first major taste of the Goldblumisms, I think.
For sure. I mean, I don't know any film earlier than this that I think he was in films before this, but this is kind of the first one that where I knew of him being in it, and now having seen this for the first time today, yeah, he is so Goldblum in this movie. It's great, though.
He's so Dr. Ian Malcolm in this movie.
Or Seth Brundle. He's got both going. The lead is Donald Sutherland. I think he's excellent.
He's so good in this movie.
Yeah,
he's so good. I love Donald.
He did a lot of great stuff in the 70s.
I kind of hate Leonard Nimoy in this movie. Not because he's bad. I just don't like his character.
Yeah, I didn't like his character either.
I don't get why people flock to see this piece of shit and get his book signed. He just seems like he's supposed to be this big, sort of big name psychiatrist, but he seems so close-minded. I guess it's because your theory is he's sort of already an alien by the beginning, where I never really thought that, but that actually makes more sense.
I just thought he was an alien from the moment that he was introduced to us.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
we
in
don't
the
know
first
when it
day
happens,
of it, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's already trying to, there's things in the film that I felt he was doing that showed signs that he already
Especially
was,
when he's pulling the lady back who wants to go talk to her husband. or
Yeah.
whatever. See? Learn something new every time you watch a movie.
The movie works really well, much like a film like The Thing or the original Thing, which is Thing from Another World or whatever.
Yeah.
Where it plays with the paranoia of who is a human and who's not a human. And
Yeah.
they do a really good job in this film.
We were talking about it while we were watching it. You got Veronica Cartwright and Jeff Goldblum and Donald Sutherland, and we're sitting here going, man, what a great rounded cast of like 70s, early 80s horror actors. The best thing I learned about this movie I think this is the third or fourth time I've seen it, is that Veronica Cartwright's name is Nancy in this. And if you put that
Cartwright.
together, her name is Nancy Cartwright.
Well, and then also, really strange, if anyone's seen this movie, in the first 2 minutes, you get a cameo from Robert Duvall sitting on a swing set playing a pedophile priest. It was such an odd moment to start the movie, and it had me kind of waiting for his character to come back. Well, he's not a character, but waiting for such a known actor in this film.
To play a creepy priest on a swing staring at kids in a playground, did he owe someone a favor or did they owe him one?
I don't know what's going on there.
That's what I want to know. I think the makeup and the effects are incredible.
They are.
From the very first few shots after the credits, you had said, wow, that looks amazing. From the little morphed sort of veins that come out and infect the plant's life. Yeah. It was so cool.
And even the effect of the aliens on their home world, I don't know if, they move, I guess it's established that they're moving from planet to planet as it dies, but the very beginning has this kind of montage of, very much like the beginning of Look Who's Talking, where you have the sperm traveling through the fallopian tubes or whatever.
It pretty much was space sperm.
It's space sperm being shot off of a planet.
It makes sense because then pods show up.
Yeah.
And there's babies.
It even kind of looks like it, but yeah, that was a cool effect too, the way it looked.
Yeah, it did.
But especially once it was landing on the plants and growing, that was awesome. The effects of actually taking over the bodies and like this white-haired stuff that starts cocooning the bodies was a really cool effect. As you pointed out, it's not always what you'd expect from alien life movies where everything's dripping and gooey. There's a certain
dryness to it.
Dry, but believability to it.
Yeah. It's kind of like if a xenomorph egg dried up inside and like opened, and it was just bleh. People were like expecting the gooiness, and it was just dry inside, like the Griswold's turkey.
I think it's a really good science fiction film.
It's a fun movie. It's super fun.
It's fun.
It takes
creepy.
From the original, it takes these dark turns that the original obviously didn't take. Because from what I remember about the original, hearing about, they did shoot a dark ending that had a similar one where Mr. Scrimshaw from Inner Space, who is the original in the first one, who makes an interesting cameo in this one, does turn. And then they reshot it because it was too dour and too scary. You know, him and the girl are on the mountainside and everything's falling apart, and then the military shows up and they're, come in the trucks, and like, we're turning this around, we figured it out, and then boom, it ends.
Okay.
Where this one obviously goes, everything is fucking chaos and fucked.
See, I thought the original, not having seen it, did end with kind of the same thing. Knowing, like, he sees in the back of the truck that it's filled with pods and they're being driven out of the city. And I think it's him, like, screaming about, they're getting away with the pods, somebody stop them. But I thought it kind of ended right there.
That's the original ending.
Studio interference makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think for the time, I think there was a reason that they did it, because people
Yeah.
were freaking the fuck out over stuff going on.
So in this 70s version, they got to go with the darker ending that they originally had
which
planned.
is so much more fun. And the scariest thing in this movie is the Turkish mud bath house, which is so disgusting and foul, with all these fat, hairy back dudes farting in mud baths.
From the moment we walked into that location, I was just disgusted by everything we were seeing, and I just don't want to know any more about what goes on a daily basis in that place. So yeah, this movie has some really creepy, grotesque imagery. I think it's got a great science fiction story that obviously works well because it's been retold many times, and the way it plays with the paranoia of, you know, who's who and stuff works really well. I really enjoyed this movie. I think it was my favorite of our 3 picks for the day.
I will second that. It's my favorite of the 3 picks as well.
It is a little bit dated with its 70s music at times.
But that's what makes it so cool.
It does. It's fun to watch
got a
these
problem
films.
with 70s music, man?
I just think that there were times where, not just because it had a dated sound to the music, I kind of think they blew it on the score at times. It's a unique score. It builds to not a crescendo that ever breaks. It keeps going until the scene cuts to the next scene and you have no more music. Yeah. And it kind of is annoying, I felt.
Even though there was no Donald Sutherland 18-minute long sex scene in this one.
He tried, though.
He
tried a number of times.
Alfred Hitchcock presents. The Birds was based on a story by Daphne du Maurier, whose work had been the basis for 2 earlier films by the master of suspense.
all you cinema drunks out there, happy Halloween. So I'm here with Magic Mike. I don't know, your body's a little distracting to me. I think I'm gonna have to do something about this.
What?
Alakazam!
Oh, this is a lot more comfortable. Thank you for that.
There you go. All right, let's get into this ghost story.
Okay, 1980. Yeah, it feels like it. It's 40 years old this year, John.
40 years old.
Yeah.
Celebrating a birthday.
Starring the late, great George C. Scott, died 21 years ago, almost to this month.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a lot of great performances, so I'm not gonna say this is one of his best. In fact, we kind of thought there was areas, I remembered this being even more dramatic than it actually turned out to be on this viewing. But,
I do too, actually, yeah.
It's still a really good performance by George C. Scott, and one of the main reasons why I like this movie is his performance.
Yeah, director was Peter Medak, who did a lot of TV stuff, did some Tales from the Crypt episodes,
nice.
Did a lot of Twilight Zone episodes when it came back in the 80s, and he did a couple of one of your favorite TV shows.
Hannibal,
yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah, he must be pretty old, but
yeah, seriously, or he was very young when he did this movie to some degree.
Yeah, but he did a good job directing this movie.
Yeah.
It's not what you would think. So, you know, it's a really slow, I wouldn't say off-putting to like maybe younger audiences, but it's really, it's what I love. It's atmospheric, and I love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy, I'd say more of the 70s horror, the pacing of a 70s horror, and less of 80s, and definitely anything that's current right now where it needs to be at such a rapid pace.
Yeah.
It takes its time to build its story, but I think that there's always something interesting going on within the story. If you're paying attention to it, it's unfolding like a mystery throughout this movie.
There's so many different things that come out in this movie where, you know, he's like, it's a lot of investigating. I think you had said like it has that kind of Ring feel because, you know, it's someone who's kind of burdened with what's going on. But then there's always that question that'll never be answered when it comes to haunted house movies is like, just fucking move.
Yeah.
Just get out of there. But as the story progresses, you realize, would that have even done anything anyway, you know? But at first you always ask that question.
I think if you're one of those people who the first scary thing happens in the house, you're like, move, get out of there, never come back.
Right.
If that's your feeling, you're gonna get frustrated with this movie because he keeps coming back to the house fearlessly. I mean, that's actually impressive that he's never really afraid of the situations he's getting involved in.
No, he's more curious.
He's more intrigued each time something happens. Let's talk about one of the other things that really shines in this movie, the sound design.
Yeah.
That's where this movie is a very atmospheric horror movie. It's not really about, there's jump scares, but it's not like in-your-face jump scares. They're definitely going to come from the sound design and the creaks and the creepy sounds that an old house has.
Yeah.
Especially in the first half of the movie. That's really what the buildup of this movie is built on. Is the eeriness of this location.
When you say that the sound design is more prominent in the first half, that's a perfect way to put it because the first half of this movie, the haunts and the scares, they're all done through the audio. They're all done through the sound design, where the second half you get more visual, door slamming and fire and things like that. So the creepiest stuff, and this is a layered mix, like super layered, not just like, oh, there's a creepy sound and there's like drips going on. And even that scene you were talking about where George C. Scott was like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you, like, they just add in that extra echo that goes all the way up the levels of the house. Like, that's so good.
Yeah, you can feel like the space comes alive in that moment when he's screaming.
What do you want from me? I've done everything I can do.
And a haunting movie is only as good as the kids that you can get to do the creepy voices of the deceased kids. And ooh, that is.
Will you tell us why you are not at rest?
My father.
Joseph, did you die in this house?
My room.
Some creepy voices.
Great job. You almost have to strain to hear it. It's one of those movies that you want to watch at night in the dark, sound cranked up to 11, but be prepared with the sound cranked up to 11, that because the scares come from creaky sounds and scary sounds in the house, they're going to come out of nowhere and they're going to fucking freak you out and blow your sound system. But that's kind of the way you want to watch this movie.
Yeah, it's kind of weird saying how well the movie's mixed sound design wise, and then at the same time going like, well, you're going to be like hard to hear some of the dialogue. Next thing you know, it's going to blow your speakers out with a loud car crash or something. But that's the intent.
Let's talk a little bit about the story. It starts off with tragedy. George C. Scott's family is killed in an accident on the roadside, and
horrible.
He's trapped
accident.
in a glass case of emotion in that moment.
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
And then that sets off this story of this grieving father who's just trying to come to terms with, you know, all the loss and get back with his life. He's a composer, so he rents this big, giant ass house, way bigger than anyone needs, but it has this old piano in it and this perfect music room that's going to be great for him to get back to work and try and get on with his life.
Yeah.
And then the ghost story ensues. And that's where it becomes very much like The Ring. It plays out. The rest of the movie has even takes place in Seattle, same place The Ring takes place.
Yeah.
But obviously there's no videotape in this movie, but a ghost trying to solve its own murder is kind of what you have going on in this movie.
Yeah, and the way it's pushing George C. Scott's character into the directions that it wants him to go in. And I think that, because we were like, does it come back into play about his wife and daughter? I think that it's actually such a good script that it's there the entire time. It may not be mentioned, like, oh, you know, well, this put the rest, now I can move on.
You never
get that.
Because of his performance, you never forget that he's still grieving over the loss of his
never
daughter.
forget it, but the story, and like when we're like, how come he's not scared, he's more intrigued, he's more driven, it's because it's a kid who died.
Yes, that's the motivating factor, as you pointed out.
And they never have to say that in the movie. It's just that's what's driving him to everything, you know?
Yeah.
That's good writing right there, folks.
Yeah.
The name, the Changeling. You know that there's going to be some kind of second...
Do you hear the house speaking to us right now?
That's definitely sounded like a wheelchair turning in its tracks.
The unique aspect of the story and the title, which I think some people might be confused. I didn't even remember till this viewing of like, why is it the Changeling? And it's kind of a unique part of the story.
It makes it creepier. It's a creepy situation, and like as it all unfolds, and I mean, this guy should have been a fucking investigator, not just a composer, because he launches an entire investigation himself in days and finds out like deepest, darkest, crazy secrets of this like. Not just the town.
He finds a secret room in the house, which is never a good idea to go into a secret room.
Yeah, that's that room. You know, like I said, would you, if someone paid you $1,000 to sleep in that for one night?
Nope. Not without a whole team of paranormal investigators and maybe a couple UFC fighters. I don't know.
What do you think about the cinematography and the shot selections? I thought it was pretty fantastic. It's almost up there with the sound.
I agree. Yeah, I think even though we point out the sound design as one of the strong aspects of the production values of this movie, it's top notch all the way through. The cinematography, the shot selection. The production design, as we said, the house, and not just the creepy old house, but there's this other mansion in the movie that's pretty impressive, and really just all the locations. There was like downtown Seattle scenes that were like, oh, that's amazing cinematography or amazing architecture.
A lot of
stuff
stuff
like
in
that.
The streets were shot really good.
All the creepy lighting in the house at night, you know, just really stands out. It's never too hard to see what's going on. You have just the right level of darkness,
not too dark
to be scary. Even a couple scenes that we both mentioned where they layer some sound design with an image of a shadow walking towards your main character.
That's so good.
How did you die? Overdose.
It seems so creepy, and then it turns out to be just reality. We thought it was not going to be.
It's a huge piece of misdirection done by the sound design and one shot that goes from one room to the next. I loved that because you don't know what is that. Is that music just playing because it's the movie and we're listening to it again? Oh no, it's someone else listening to it, and that shadow
is
them.
As you pointed out, because of the casting of a great creepy child voice, you're so kind of transfixed and engaged in that moment, and then the imagery on the screen of the shadow, you're like, what's about to happen here?
Yeah. This kid's voice rivals that of one Mary Hobbs from Session 9 when she goes in those different voices. It's pretty close. It's not as scary as Simon.
That's a strong endorsement right there.
Simon's the scariest voice in any movie ever made.
I live in the weak and the wounded. Dog.
I think some of the revelations in this movie, even though it's slow, it's rewarding. Like, you just stick with this movie. It's only slow because it's building atmosphere and made at a time where you didn't have to rush the pace to keep a viewer engaged, and I'm able to enjoy it still.
But if I have one criticism, this is my third time watching this movie. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I watched it 2 times prior.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the ending being so ambiguous and we don't have to give away everything that happens, but certain characters I thought were actually doing something, but it turns out they weren't. So was it metaphorical or is it like spiritual astral projection? And then it kind of ends abruptly, like a lot of those old 70s, 80s horror movies did. But I remember there being more closure to where you're almost like, well, I don't know, did the ghost get what it wanted? Did it get it just kind of ends quicker than I remember.
Well, and it even ends like so many early 80s movies had to have an ending that kind of alluded to the ghost is still, the presence is still around. Like, not everything is solved. It has a final image that sells that the things are still afoot at this creepy location.
Yeah.
And so that leaves it even more ambiguous because our main character goes through a lot to appease this ghost in what he believes is what the ghost desires to stop it from haunting and even at one point killing a character in this movie, which I didn't realize it was capable of. Like the powers this ghost has is kind of an interesting ride that you see in this film because it progresses in a way that we didn't know, if it would actually get to that level.
Right. I like to think that most, like I said, this is a well-written movie, but most horror movies, they try to set up their rules within their movie and stick with those rules. And this one, you could argue that the ghost is progressing and waking up more and more as more things are being unraveled.
I think, you were pointing
and that's
that
why
out.
he can do stuff outside of the house. But then that begs the question, why does he need this man to sort of get all these, if he can push the medallion thing out, it's just well,
and I think we both kind of said that of like I was pointing out, why did it take almost 80 years for, even though there's been hauntings in this house and no one's wanted to live there, why did it take kind of 80 years for it to really get to this level where the ghost is pushing somebody to solve the crime and making real headway here or whatever and doing what it's doing? And I think, as you point out, it's that personal connection that this man has.
Yeah, that's right.
Him being a child, losing a child. Maybe if we're looking at as we said, the ending maybe has this moment where we're not sure if it's metaphorical or someone is astral projection, they're just thinking that they're somewhere that they're not. If we look at it that way, that the movie kind of has those ties, maybe there is this really special connection that this character, because of losing a child, can communicate in a way no one else ever could with the ghost.
Well, in the music box, I think you're right, because the music box mimicking the song that he played.
That's right.
Yeah, that kind of has something to do with that.
He plays it without ever hearing it.
Yeah.
It's in his mind.
Yeah.
So there are those weird connections that the film makes.
Yeah. There's a couple of loose ends. There's a couple of, I wouldn't call them major plot holes, but loose ends where, why'd you, the fate of the house, it's why'd the ghost do that? Especially if it's you said, there's the final image
at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't really come together, but again, not every ghost story has to. It wrapped up George C. Scott's character. And let me say something about this movie. I was thinking this the whole time while watching it. And that's one of the cool things about George C. Scott and the era that he was acting in later in his life, you can make a film where your main character, protagonist, is kind of an aging, I don't want to call him a senior citizen in this movie, but he's an older guy. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that anymore. And having been someone who wrote a novel that is about a 78-year-old man, that apparently no one wanted to read. I sympathize with that, and I really respect the fact that they made a movie where the main character is an older guy. I mean, he's not like at the end of his life. It's like probably, I don't know, in the 80s when you look, he could have been 40, you know, for all I know, like how you look in the 80s.
That's the way George C. Scott is.
Yeah, but and he's done that in other movies too. Even like The Exorcist 3, he's an olding, like aging detective, and he's the main character. Like,
yeah.
I guess if you're a good enough actor, even if you're old, you can carry a movie. I don't know how good The Changeling did financially, but I know it's become a classic
But
horror
yeah,
movie.
like if it was made today, even with him being the lead character, you would have younger actors surrounding him to some degree, playing. You know, they'd have neighbors or.
If this movie was
somebody or-
remade, it would be a young couple.
Yeah, it'd be totally different. Definitely had a great score. I thought this movie, I mean, along with the sound design, they actually work hand in hand. Sometimes where I was like, oh, is that part of the score? Or is that a sound you heard in the house?
Yeah, that's
and so that's a really nice.
Having just listened to the score, I didn't. Out of context of the movie, you don't really notice that stuff as much.
Yeah, so I think and there's some really great use of classical music because he's a composer at times. You know, I actually wanted more of that. I thought when he was doing that little session that he had, that little practice session with the students at home, that was like an intense little song they were playing, and I was like, I almost want to hear some of that later in this movie if it gets intense. But it's more of a quiet movie. It's the intensities come at moments in this movie, especially with the help of the score. It's able to intensify and go from dead quiet to intense very quickly, and that's one of the great things about this movie. But I don't think it does it too often. Like even though we're talking about there's a lot of like audible jump scares and things like that in this movie, it's not so much that you're like getting annoyed, like, okay, another one of those. Like, they're pieced out through this movie perfectly.
And like we said, it's not from a musical cue that pumps its fucking volume up to 11 to tell you to be scared. It's a door slamming, and they just use the effect so well. And jump scares have nothing to do with music, and they have everything to do with the shot selection of the shot right before the jump scare.
Yeah.
You know, it's setting up something you don't know is coming. If you do know the jump scare is coming, then they fucked up. You know? And that happens all the time in modern horror.
90% of modern horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that when I think about it, maybe because George C. Scott being in Exorcist 3, I almost think of this being like in the class of those 70s horror movies that have that really like demonic sounding score, like The Exorcist and The Omen and a lot of those other that are kind of religious based. And this one is not a religious based horror movie really at all.
Not at all.
A couple times the score sounds that way, but it's not really that. It's still creepy and effective all throughout, but it's not really that like chanting or like demonic sounding that you kind of get from some of those other films.
You don't see any crosses. He doesn't go to churches.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't go religious at all.
He brings in a medium, and that's the closest thing you get to like someone who like knows anything outside of what he's doing.
To be honest, I was gonna say while we were watching the film, that was the one part where pacing-wise, even though that's kind of like an interesting aspect, like ghost story, okay, a seance, like this is gonna be a good scene typically, it kind of went on a little too long, and I felt like that was one of the parts of the movie where I started to lose interest a little bit.
I feel exactly the same. I think it's medium scenes in horror movies bring the movie to a halt. You have to get everyone around the table, and then you're like disconnected from the main character for a while.
Yeah, and they don't even come back. I mean, I guess because it's better that he chooses to investigate on his own. He's able to figure out stuff. They apparently just after doing a seance leave and don't even really follow up what they just investigated.
Yeah, I think you said like, so did they not listen to this tape? There's like a spirit of a boy talking all over it. The scene after, when he starts listening to the tapes, it gets horrifying.
Yeah.
And the way the way the director of this movie was like, let's move through the corridors, let's go through the hallways, let's go back up to where this whole thing is rooting from while we're listening to what's on the tape. That's another like thing about Session 9 that makes it so fucking frightening, is like you're just seeing
the location.
You're seeing the location
the
with
recordings.
Ugh.
I certainly respect The Changeling.
Me too.
I think it's a great ghost story. It's not the strongest like horror movie. Like, it's a ghost story, and it's got its spooks and its scares. But like, I don't know, horror sometimes, like when you hear the word horror, you want something graphic, I guess.
Yeah.
And it certainly is not that, but it's spooky.
This is one of my favorite types: the quiet, haunting, atmospheric, creepy, sound-driven ones. That have payoffs for years after you watch it because they stick with you. Then, you have your Night of the Demons, which is just wild and crazy and lots of boobs and lots of blood, and that stuff's great too.
Yeah, good for a Friday night.
Thanks for watching Cinema Gulp's Extreme Halloween. Happy Halloween, cinema drunks.